Raja Ampat. It is one of the most unique environments in the world. So the 4 main islands, but there's thousands of little islands scattered throughout this whole area that make it a kayaker's paradise. Each island within that zone has its own unique special features. So every place you go is just incredible. You go into any dive shop and you mention Raja Ampat, their jaw just drops and they're like, you're going there? Like it's pretty renowned. So why is this place so special? So I'm going to chat with you about this place called Raja Ampat. And I would say the majority of people I have met have never heard of this place or kind of have no idea about it. Divers often know because it's an incredible, really famous diving place. But beyond that kind of diving world, not many people are familiar with it. So I'll chat about where this place is. We'll talk a lot about why it's so special because it is one of the most unique environments in the world. We'll talk about the different highlights of the area, kayaking, diving, and snorkeling, and then how to visit this place, as well as some logistical things to think about if you're going to come and you're going to visit. Where in the world is Raja Ampat? On this little Google Earth image, Australia is the continent on the bottom of the screen there. And right above Australia is this island that kind of looks like a bird, actually, and that's Papua New Guinea. The east side of Papua New Guinea is an independent country, and the west side is governed by Indonesia. And this was called West Papua. It used to be called Irian Jaya, like years ago, and so some people might know it by that name, but currently it's called West Papua. And so if we zoom in on this image, the northwest corner of West Papua is this place called Raja Ampat, and it's basically an area within West Papua. It's also called the Bird Heads Peninsula because it kind of looks like a bird's head from above. There's a few different kind of zones within Raja Ampat. So first you can see the city there. It's called Sorong, and that's the main entrance city into this area. Raja Ampat means the 4 kings in the local language, and it's basically a myth story about the creation of this area. And the 4 kings represent the 4 major islands in Raja Ampat. So this first area is the first island called Gam, then is Batanta, Sulawesi, and Mazul. So the 4 main islands, but there's thousands of little islands scattered throughout this whole area that make it a kayaker's paradise. And there's kind of 3 loose zones. So anything above this line, we consider northern Raja Ampat. In between these 2 lines, we consider it central Raja Ampat. And below this bottom line here is southern Raja Ampat. So 3 different zones. And each place has unique characteristics, and each island within that zone has its own unique special features. So every place you go is just incredible. So why is this place so special? Well, many, many reasons. But the place that we focus on is the coast. Because the terrain is so rugged, it's really difficult to explore the interior. So most of kind of the coastal areas, there's some small villages, they get around by boat, and it's an incredible place to kayak. And obviously divers are using the coast. But there's so much more to West Papua than just the coast. The island sits on the equator, and West Papua has the only glacier on the equator in the world. And these are 5,000 meter peaks surrounding this glacier. So really unique area. At one point, they estimate there were 380 different tribes living in West Papua and totally different culture. There were more than 600 different languages. And the reason for this was, again, because it was so rugged that going from one valley to another valley was almost impossible because of the nature of the terrain. So this picture here is a place called the Balium Valley, and it's more to the east side in West Papua. And it's a 60-kilometer long, 20-kilometer wide valley. And the pigs are their currency, their wealth. They live in these little round huts. The women basically run life. and the men train for war games. That's all the men do. They train for these, it's like almost the Olympics, but in kind of a war situation. So really fascinating group of people. And they were only discovered by outsiders in World War II. A plane just happened to cruise over the valley and saw these huts, and that was the beginning of contact for that group. The most recent kind of first contact was in the 1970s. So really, really fascinating interior part of the island. Another reason why this place is so fascinating is it has the highest marine biodiversity in the world. Marine biologists are fascinated, and there's been so many studies in this place because there's so many endemic fish, endemic mantis shrimp, and endemic reef to this area. And I'll get into a little bit going forward here about why that is, why it's so special. But one of the reasons is that because it sits on the equator, they think that all the coral and the reef are quite adapted to warm weather or warm water temperatures. So when every other kind of reef and coral system in the world is dying off because of increasing temperatures, this place is one of the places that has been able to maintain its integrity and incredible beauty. The underwater world is pretty mind-blowing. So basically, most of Raja Ampat is made up of limestone islands. And limestone at one point was a living reef that was surrounding a volcano. And over the eons, the volcanoes eroded away, water levels dropped, or they had uplifting on the continent. And basically that living reef system condensed and formed into limestone. Now, limestone has a weak acidic compound in it that when it rains or fresh water hits it, it starts eroding that acid away. And so it's something that we call a karst landscape with all these kind of humps or sinusoidal features. And these islands will continue to erode away in those forms until eventually it's just all these little single island humps, and then they'll fall over. So there's so many caves and passageways because of that weak acidic compound, and it's just a pretty fascinating place to paddle, to dive, and to explore. This area, biologists have called it the Coral Triangle. Right where Raja Ampat sits is the meeting of 4 different continental plates. At one point, they were all separated and eventually came together. So a lot of different reefs and creatures that have come together from that. It's also the meeting place of the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. So there's lots of currents going through this area and promoting larval growth and movement through this zone. When we run our trips, most of our trips, we visit the north, the central, and the south areas. And I'm just going to highlight some of the features of each zone for you, so you kind of get a sense of, if you go, which area you'd like to visit or kind of what you can expect when you're there. From that first picture, northern Raja Ampat, so the upper part of that map, is a place called Wayag Island. And this is probably the most iconic kind of marketing photos that they use if you ever see pictures of Raja on the website. It's this incredibly beautiful island with a really protected harbor and all these little mushroom islands inside. So it's really calm. It is an incredible place to kind of paddle around and explore. You can see where the jungle ends. There's basically like an overhang, and you can actually paddle under that overhang because there's so much space of where that rock has eroded. The outer coast, or the north coast of Wayag, is the exact opposite. It's super rugged. Basically just limestone cliffs for the whole length of the island, which is probably 20 kilometers long, and these beautiful arches along the way. The swell, there's pretty good swell because it's all coming from the Pacific Ocean. And so it's really dynamic, active paddling. If you're on this trip and you want to paddle the outer coast, you'd be someone who has quite a bit of experience, but you can also paddle the inner part of this island. And, you could be a pretty beginner kayaker, just a fit person, and have an incredible time. And then there's islands kind of all along the same latitude as Wayag that are very similar, quite a rugged area. So it's conditions dependent and paddler ability dependent. And then here's just a shot of how serene the inner bay of Wayag is. You can see that the Liveaboard there is anchored, and there's absolutely no rocking. You sleep like a baby in here. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. So if we move south a little bit into central Raja, One of the highlights of this place is the mangrove forests. There are 35 different species of mangroves in Raja Ampat. And in most places, like in Florida, if you go there, there's 3 different species. So it's an incredible place for mangroves. It's an area, for birds, for little fish to be protected. It's just beautiful. So there's a couple different paddles in this area that are just incredible. And the first time we ever came to Raja, we ran a camping trip. And we always hire a local guide to come with us on these trips. And we're paddling along kind of this wall of mangrove forest. And it looks pretty impenetrable. And at one point, the local guide kind of looks at me, gives me this cheeky little grin, and veers off into the mangroves. And we're like, oh, what's going on? Where's he going? So we follow him into basically this series of little channels in the mangrove forest. And you can see little sharks below you. They're chasing schools of fish, the birds chirping and hornbills flying up out of the mangrove forest. It was so beautiful. And it seemed like we meandered through this passageways for a long, long time. And then all of a sudden, it totally opened up into this beautiful lake, basically dead calm lake in the middle of this kind of mangrove forest with these limestone cliffs coming out. And everyone in the group just was totally silent. It was just this super peaceful moment. So we paddled across the lake for a while, and I'm thinking, we're going to have to turn around at some point here to get out of this lake. Again, the local guide looks at me, goes right for this rock wall. And I'm like, what is he doing? I don't understand. And we kind of round this little corner, and it opens up into this little passage out of the lake and into the open ocean. And it's such a special paddle, and there's so many different elements of it. It's one of my favorite paddles in Raja. And then if we move further down south, we get to the 4th island called Mosul. And off of Mosul is quite a big island. There's this long, kind of skinny chain of islands that run for quite a while. We spend 5 or 6 days along this island chain. And each group in this island chain is unique and different and offers something really cool. I don't know if you guys can see, there's actually a little Liveaboard right here that's anchored in this bay. This island is called Lenkafal. And it is just these secret passageways. And then you come around a corner and there's this big swim pool with these limestone cliffs all around, and really cool rock gardening through these islands. I still haven't paddled the whole length of this because there's so much to do, so much to explore. Another really cool zone in here is, we've called this the 1,000 Islands. And that's just our name for it. It's not the local name. But it's basically thousands of tiny little limestone islands. And it is so fun trying to get lost in here and finding all these new cool things. One trip, we discovered these rock wall paintings, which were incredible. There's all these rock formations that look like dragons and castles. And it's a true explore. Again, there's so much in this area to see yet that we haven't even touched on. On one of our first trips to Mosul on a Liveaboard, we were approached by a local in a little dugout. They're kind of dugout canoes. And he's like, I need to show you something. Please jump in your little tenders or your motorboats. So we all jumped into the motorboats, cruised up this long, long passage. It felt like we were totally getting lost. Come around this corner, and this dark, massive cave opens up before us. We had brought SUPs and snorkel gear. So we get on our stand-up paddle boards and don the snorkel gear, and we go and explore this cave. And you can see me heading in here, and then you can see me still heading in here. And it is this massive, it's probably 4 stories high, and there's this opening in the ceiling with this shaft of sunlight that comes through. And then we discovered this little secret snorkel channel out of the cave. It's just the most grandiose cave I've ever been in. It's pretty cool. So we make a point to come to this place on every trip because it's so incredible. Definitely one of the highlights. And then kind of the final place I'll touch on in Mosul is this place called Balbulal Island. And as you can see, it's these massive limestone pillars that are rising out of the ocean. There's these deep pockets of pools, and it is just an incredibly stunning place. We spend hours in this area because it's so, so gorgeous, and you feel so small, and that the rock around you is so old. It's an incredible place to paddle. that was all kind of the above water world, kayaking, the limestone, the different passages, the mangroves. But there's so much more to Raja Ampat than just the kayaking and diving, which is a lot in itself. So there is a feature in limestone formations called marine lakes. So they're basically caverns that have been dissolved from the water out of the rock, and they collect fresh water, but they're also connected by tunnels and caverns to the ocean. So they have a little bit of salt and a little bit of fresh water. And every marine lake has unique creatures in it, a unique pH balance. And they've discovered about 45 of these different lakes throughout Raja Ampat. And there's one that's sort of fairly accessible that we go and visit. And the highlight of this lake is that there are these jellyfish that are stingless. So you can go and swim with, it's probably millions of these jellyfish, and just you feel like you're in an alternate reality, or like the movie Avatar, as these jellyfish are just like cruising around, kind of bumping into you. At the night, they all sink to the bottom of the lake, and either when the sun comes up or when it rains, they all rise to the surface. So you see these orange blobs in the depths, and they're just coming up all around you. It's a pretty phenomenal experience. Caves are also a really cool feature in Limestone Islands, and there's many caves that we hike through. There's like loops, there's big caverns, all kinds of different experiences, and super fun to explore these caves. Lots of stalactites and stalagmites. There's bats and birds, little swallows, like cave swallows that do a little clicking sound to get around. Yeah, really cool place. So another huge highlight of Raja Ampat is the birds. These birds are called birds of paradise, and I think there's about 12 different species of them throughout the world. And they're really unique because the males go to the same place every morning. They do an incredibly unique dance, which attract the females. They'll mate. And then as soon as, probably an hour after sunrise, they disperse and they go and chill out in the forest. So it's a really easy bird to go see because it's probably 90% guaranteed that you're going to see these birds. The two that are in the Raja Ampat area is this one that's upside down. That's called the red bird of paradise. And this one on the right, which is the Wilson's bird of paradise. And the reason why they're called a bird of paradise is because the first time Europeans ever saw these birds, they had been killed by the locals, and the locals used their feathers for head dresses and different clothing adornments. But they would always chop the feet off because, they didn't use the feet for the decorations. So every time the Europeans saw these, they didn't have feet. And so they thought this bird must always be flying in the air. It never lands, not even to lay the eggs or get food or anything. And so they called it the bird of paradise. It was always in the heavens. And yeah, their dances are incredible, and they're just a super beautiful bird. Let's talk a little bit about the underwater world. Whether you're a snorkeler or a diver, this place has something for everyone. And like I said previously, it's a dive mecca. Like if you go into any dive shop and you mention Raja Ampat, their jaw just drops and they're like, you're going there? Like it's pretty renowned. But outside of that world, it's not very known. So the schools of fish are incredible. There's 40 different endemic fish that are nowhere else in the world except Raja Ampat. It's almost unfathomable. It's almost like you don't even have to move. You can just stay in one place and the schools will swim by and you'll be immersed in the schools. I've just hovered as I was diving, and these massive swarms of barracuda just get closer and closer. And some dive masters have said they've actually been in the swarm if you just are still enough. It's incredible. When I first came here, I wasn't a diver at all. And after my first trip, I was just like, I have to get my dive ticket because it's so incredible. But that being said, we've had lots of people who don't dive, and sometimes they see cooler things than the divers. We had this one trip where the divers were, at 20 meters checking out the schools of fish and oh yeah, this is awesome. We're so cool. And then the snorkelers were a little distance away, and they had an oceanic manta ray. So massive manta or oceanic ray come and swim with them. And swimming with manta rays and oceanic rays is one of the most amazing things in the world. It's like the biggest bird you could ever imagine and soaring in the air with it. It's pretty phenomenal. And sharks. There's lots of reef sharks. And again, super cool creature to swim with. The turtles, green and hawksbill turtles. And it's incredible to see them just soaring through the ocean. So there's like the big creatures and the fish, but there's also the tiny little creatures. And so this little guy, I don't know if you can actually see him. He's kind of a really light pink in the background. That's a pygmy seahorse. So this guy is no bigger than a pinky nail. Incredible to spot these. And if it weren't for the local dive masters who we have on board, I would never spot this. It's incredible that they can find these things. So there's this one little island that we visit, and we've called it Nemo Island because we've counted 400 different anemones, which is what these guys are living in, with a family of clownfish in each anemone. It's just like 400 different anemones. Pretty incredible. And then, of course, like I mentioned, the manta rays. They are amazing to swim with and paddle with. Incredibly elegant creatures. And then finally, there's the reef and the coral, which is 6% of the coral in Raja Ampat is only found here. And there's this one dive we do along this cliff wall, and it's a drift dive. So we get dropped off at one point, and you can snorkel or dive this, and you just drift with the current, and the colors and the intensity and the size of all of the different coral, plate coral, feather coral, witch's cauldron is just, again, it's like you're in Avatar. It's like you're in a completely different world. There's a few different ways to explore Raja Ampat. There's a liveaboard, homestays, or dive resorts. And I'm just going to briefly touch on each to give you an idea kind of the pros and cons of each method. The first method, and this is how we actually started in Raja Ampat, is homestays. The local Papuan people, they're pretty much subsistent fishermen. They fish, their rice is subsidized, and every village has a little garden in the back where they tend different fruits and some like root vegetables. So really, really basic living. Most families can afford to send maybe one kid to school, like upper kind of higher level schooling. And so life in the village is very simple and basic. But one of the ways that they can make money is through these homestays. So there's an initiative that the government helps fund these families, family units, building these homestays, and then you can book these homestays and stay in them. And so as you can see, there are these little huts that are generally above the water, and the family cooks breakfast, lunch, and dinner for you. And they're usually someplace on a reef where there's amazing snorkeling. Maybe there's a hike or a pathway in the back. Always like beautiful white sand beaches to chill out on. So it's a really good initiative for the locals to actually make some money, because that's absolutely the only way that they have any cash flow. Here's another example of a homestay. You can see down in the right corner, there's this dock they built. There's one little homestay there. And then they've built this quite intricate stair system up to this lookout point over this heart-shaped lagoon. It's quite a beautiful, beautiful zone. The cool part about the homestays is that you really get a cultural experience because you're living with the family. Probably 50% of these homestays are close to a village, so you can experience village life. You can go out with the family in their boats. You know, they can take you to a different reef. You can kind of see how they fish and how they live. Most of them don't speak very well English, so it's always an adventure with sign language and, you know, trying to communicate. So it's really, really a cultural experience, but it's really basic living. It's like shared toilets, no flushing toilet, kind of a bucket shower. And the food is, again, very basic. Rice, fish with, you know, maybe some fruit or some eggs. So basic, but you really get to know the people and the place. And it's budget. That would be the kind of the cheapest way to explore Raja. So the next is dive resorts. Throughout Central, because Central Raja Ampat is close to Sarong, this is the place where there is infrastructure. So there's dive resorts, but resort isn't, you know, really the right term. They're fairly basic. Most of them kind of look like a homestay, but they've got a dive center and dive masters. And they all have these motorboats so that they can take you to all kinds of different dive spots throughout Raja Ampat. And again, it's mostly around Central. The cool thing about this is that you're moving quite a bit. Every day you kind of go to a different place. You have that accessibility and there's a little bit more comfort involved. There are a couple dive resorts that are very high end. There's one in Mosul. It's the only dive resort in Mosul. And it's quite luxury, super high end. And that company has done a lot for educating the locals and helping set up the marine protected areas within Raja Ampat. And then the final way to explore Raja is on a liveaboard. And, I would say this is definitely my preferred way because it's like your moving base camp. On, one 12-day trip, you can go to north, you can go to central, and you can go to south. And so you kind of see it all, whereas all those other methods, you're a little bit more stationary. There's definitely more luxury involved with a liveaboard. This is kind of what the interior looks like, quite open concept, quite beautiful, quite comfortable. The cabins, there's all ensuite bathrooms and air con. There are some budget liveaboards that are quite basic where there's bunks where you're sharing rooms and it's shared bathrooms, but there's also all the way up to quite luxury liveaboards. So most of the trips we run in Raja are either liveaboard or homestay trips. Depending on what you want to get out of it and what your budget is, you can do either of those places. Yeah, 3 different ways to explore this incredible place. And Raja Ampat, no matter your fitness or your experience in kayaking or diving or snorkeling, it's a place worth visiting. We've had couples on trips where one member is an avid kayaker and the other is a diver. And so they've chosen which activity they want to do. There's lots of kayaks that look exactly like this picture, just completely flat water, no wind, and so you don't need a lot of experience to be paddling around. And same with the snorkeling and diving. We've had divers who are newly minted divers because they knew Raja Ampat was like a dive mecca. And so it's their first time diving outside of a course. That's totally legit. I had a free diver on a course once. She could hold her breath for like 6 minutes. It was incredible watching her just swimming in the ocean. And we've also had people who are uncomfortable swimming. And so we'll give them either a pool noodle or PFD or life ring, and they can experience the place just like the rest of us. So there's so many different options for different abilities. So I'm going to launch a little bit into what a typical trip of ours looks like, a liveaboard trip of ours. I had a guest last year who said, you really need to change your tagline to adventure without rest because these trips are action-packed. It's a long way to travel for most people, and we want to make the most out of every moment. So we pack it in. It's a really, really full trip. And this route here on this map, take this with a grain of salt because it's, weather dependent and there's lots of variables in this trip, but this is kind of a typical trip. So we start in Sorong, do a long transfer down to Mosul, spend about a week cruising through Mosul, and then another kind of long transport up to Central Raja, spend a few days in Central, up to Wayag, a few days in Wayag, a few days over in this area near Gam Island, and then back to Sorong. All right. So that's kind of the big overview of the route. Like I said, this is a liveaboard trip. So we've got this moving base camp, which creates such incredible options and flexibility. So, maybe the visibility isn't good in one area. So instead of going there, we can go to a different zone and get good visibility for the diving. There's just so many options. And what we usually do is each day, we basically move for each outing. And then either in the evening, we'll do a long transport or in kind of the early morning hours. We don't stay in one place very long at all, and we make use of every moment. The liveaboard has 11 crew members, so local Indonesian crew and one cruise director who is generally, the boat is French owned, so generally the cruise director is French. Audrey is the woman right now, and she's totally amazing human being. So 2 dive masters on board, and this is basically the dive center on board. We all get one little bin to organize all our gear. Wetsuits are here. All the BCDs are in that zone. And then the dive masters will do a briefing on that whiteboard before every dive. Our kayaks are stored on the very upper deck of the liveaboard, and for every outing, the crew put them down in the water, and once we're finished the outing, they haul them back up. And all of the kayak gear is stored kind of in that dive center area as well. So everything's very organized, and we have everything that we need on the boat for us to all these places that we go. So a typical day, again, if there is such a thing in Raja Ampat, it's packed full. So what we always tell people is it is up to you to manage your energy levels. So if we do 4 activities in a day and you're like, Oh my goodness, that's way too much. You are free to take off as much time as you want. We've definitely had some people want to go kayaking and some people want to get dropped off at a beach. The tender will take you to the beach and you can just chill out there while the group is kayaking. So there's tons of options. Sometimes people just want to chill, read a book on the deck. And so all of those options are there for you. Those people who are super active and want to get the most out of the trip, at the end of these 12 days, you will be tired, guaranteed. Early morning, the sun rises at about 6:15. So I'm on the deck probably at about 5:30 doing Pilates and yoga, and it's open to anyone who wants to join, which doesn't happen very often, but that's an option. Right off the bat in the morning, we usually have a really small little breakfast and try to get out pretty early to beat the heat for activities that can maybe be quite uncomfortable in the heat. It is quite hot in Raja Ampat. It's like 30 degrees Celsius and very humid. Really, really high humidity, which is what makes the heat extra intense. So if we're going to go for a hike or go explore something on land, we'll do that first thing in the morning. Sometimes we'll also go for a dive. If we have a really dedicated dive group on board, then we'll try and get more dives in during the day, and we'll usually start right off the bat in the morning. And we also do simultaneous activities. So if 4 people are divers and 6 people are kayakers, we can do 2 different activities at the same time, just split into 2 groups. We have lots of staff, dedicated kayak guide, myself or my husband, so lots of options. And then we'll go back to the boat for a big breakfast. And I'll talk about the food in a second, but the breakfasts are pretty incredible. So big breakfast, and then 9:30, we'll head out for the first kayak outing. We basically launch from the little tender, which is right next to the boat, and go out for a paddle and explore. And every paddle is different. Because the scenery is so beautiful and the coastline is so intricate, it's not about speed or distance. It's really about just soaking in the place and exploring. There are some kayak outings where it is about distance and we go from point A to point B and the boat will pick us up. Some is like just a circle and we come back to the boat. Kind of every trip is slightly different. And then because of the heat, we always go for a swim during the kayak. Sometimes we'll bring snorkel gear if there's a good reef on the paddle, but we'll always jump in. It's so refreshing to get out of the boat and just have a nice swim on a beautiful white sand beach in this incredibly remote, gorgeous place. And then is lunchtime. On board, there's a dedicated and trained chef. He's Indonesian and has basically been trained in all the different cuisines of Indonesia. We have the option of Indonesian cuisine or Western cuisine, and most people choose the Indonesian option. And the food is delicious. There's a lot of it. There's always a meat option, some kind of carb option, and vegetables and fruit. So delicious food. In the early afternoon, we'll again go for either a dive and snorkel outing because that's in the heat of the day. So it's nice to be immersed in the water. Both options are always present. And if you have your dive certification, you'll dive. And if you don't, it's a snorkel. And then we'll go for a second kayak, a late afternoon kayak. Again, exploratory. We probably move the boat from the morning activity to this afternoon activity to explore a new zone. Usually the paddles are 2 to 4 hours, depending on the trip. And then we all gather around the dinner table for dinner. And there's always plentiful food. Dessert is presented, smoothie drinks. And then we watch the sunset from the top of the boat. And the sunsets in Raja are just stunning, super stunning. And then seeing the stars come out on board. And then everyone is usually pretty exhausted and heads to an early bed. So on the equator where we are, it's basically the sun is up around 6 and it goes down at 6. So that's the time that we have to be active outside. And then we'll have a series of lectures that we present on the trip just to inform everyone about the geography, the flora, the fauna, the coral and the reef, and the history of West Papua. So we try to educate and inform, just share information about the place and the people and the marine protected areas that are in this zone. Okay, so let's jump a little bit into logistics. I would say for North Americans, it is not easy. It's not short to get to this place, but we've kind of figured out the best route to get here. Coming from Canada, or if you're coming from the States, it's easiest to fly from North America to Taipei, and then you fly from Taipei to Jakarta, which is on this map here, and then to Makassar, and then to Sorong. They've just recently started direct flight from Jakarta to Sorong. So if the timing works out for you, that's a nice option. But otherwise, it's puddle jumping from Jakarta to Makassar to Sorong. The flight from North America to Taipei, for us in British Columbia, I think it's 10 hours. And then Taipei to Jakarta is 7. And then this is a 4-hour. Jakarta to Sorong is 4 hours. Sorong is not the nicest city. If you want to kind of come early to get over jet lag and kind of acclimatize, we recommend people either hang out in Jakarta or Bali, which is Denpasar down here, and then come to Sorong. The less time that you can spend in Sorong, the better, which is really ironic because Raja Ampat is one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and the city is not a very nice city. If you're coming from Australia or in that zone, then it's easiest to fly to Bali, which is Denpasar here. And then same thing, there is a direct flight from Bali to Sorong, or you puddle jump from Denpasar to Makassar and then to Sorong. And we found that nusatrip.com is a really good airline website to find local flights in Indonesia. The seasons in Raja Ampat are called the northwest monsoon and southeast monsoon. When you think of monsoon, you think of torrential rain and that you're never going to get a reprieve. We run trips basically from the beginning of November until the end of February. November and December are really hot, dead calm, like not a cloud in the sky. Again, generally, right? Really, really flat seas, very little wind. In the afternoons, because we're on the equator, these thunderstorms will materialize, dump a bunch of water. This guy here is getting that dump of water. And then in an hour, it'll be gone and there'll be no clouds and it'll be super sunny and humid and hot. So November and December, if you love the heat and humidity, that's the time to come. January and February, it's a little bit cloudy, which I find really nice. It's a little bit of reprieve from the sun, and it can be a little bit more windy with some swell. Can be just a little bit more active paddling on some of the more open paddles that we have, not quite as hot as November and December. So that's kind of a general outline of the 4 different months that we're there. Equipment to bring. Most things that you need are actually on Jacari. They have all of the dive and snorkel equipment, masks, fins, wetsuits, all of that is provided. All of the kayak equipment is provided. Kayak, paddle, PFD, and skirt, even like little foam mattresses for your butt if you're someone who needs a bit of elevation or just a bit more comfortable. All that's provided. So really the only thing you need to bring is your personal clothing and what you're going to wear. Unless you're someone who's quite picky. Like I'm really picky about the paddle I use, so I always bring my own. The paddles we supply are kind of a plastic fiberglass Werner Skagit. It's like a touring blade. But if you're someone who likes a carbon paddle, then you'd want to bring your own. My 2 favorite things, the most important equipment for me is a wide-brimmed sun hat and a cotton collared long sleeve shirt. And that is what I paddle in. Because the sun is so intense, if you're white like me, you will burn so quickly and your body will just get dehydrated. Your body has to take more energy to heal those cells that have burnt. And so I find it so important to be completely covered up. And because we're not camping, we're on a boat, cotton doesn't really matter. You take it back to the boat, you give it a rinse, and you hang it, and it's dry in an hour. And then it's good for the next outing. So those are my 2 top gear picks for Raja Ampat. Obviously, sunglasses super important. We recommend reef-safe sunscreen to try and preserve the corals and the reefs in this area. Some kind of water shoe for kayaking is really nice. Being barefoot, after like an hour, your feet really start getting kind of annoyed by the foot pedals. So some kind of footwear to paddle in, and then a light hiking shoe or runner, because we do some hikes and the hikes they definitely require a kind of a running shoe or something supportive. Over here, this couple in the sarongs. The sarong is my favorite piece of clothing. You can use it as a women, you can use it as a dress, as a skirt. Men, you can use it as a beach towel. You can lie on the beach in it. Super versatile and really nice to have. When we go visit the villages, we try and dress fairly conservatively, short sleeves, no shoulders showing, covered up to the knee. And so sarongs are really nice just to throw over a pair of shorts when you go to a village. Whenever I'm diving or snorkeling, I wear a long sleeve rash guard shirt and long sleeve rash guard pants. Again, I just don't want to burn because it just saps your energy. And I would say it's fairly uncommon, but sometimes there's sea lice in the ocean or little plankton that are a little bit stingy. And so it's nice to have some protection from that. So you're not like, ooh, I have to get out of the water now, but you can just keep swimming or snorkeling, no worries. And then finally, it's nice to have a really light paddling jacket because even though it's 30 degrees and it's super humid, when those quick thunderstorms come through and it's wet and a little bit windy, I've actually had someone who's been shivering after one of those thunderstorms. So it's really nice to have a jacket like that. Obviously, there's a few more things you want to bring, but if you come on a trip, it's in a packing list or you can ask. But those are kind of my essential pieces of equipment for a trip to Raja Ampat. I am going to show you guys a video that will give you a real sense of the place, without being there, being able to experience what a trip like this is and how incredible it is to be in this environment. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Raja Ampat. There you go. Little taste of beautiful Raja Ampat. Thank you guys for listening. And yeah, I would say if you have the time and the money, however you visit the place, you won't regret it. It's like a trip of a lifetime. So incredibly beautiful, especially if you're like a diver or a photographer. Incredible.